Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Laurie Smith. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another, the continuation. And I'm glad to be here this morning, just waking up, having some coffee. I hope you're all having a good morning so far. And I've got Wanda here with me and Pasagio Olivello. Good morning, Wanda, and good evening, Pasagio Olivello. I hope your day went well. You're having a good evening. And Wanda, I hope you have a good day today. Let's hope it's a good one. And yeah, I've been up for a while, but I'm still kind of sleepy. I'm having to have an extra cup of coffee. So we're looking at the Survivor to Thriver workbook. It's a manual put out by the ASCA, Adult Survivors of Child Abuse. It's free to use, and they don't mind people using it. They want adult survivors to get a hold of that information. It's on their website, www.ascasupport.org, and you can use it. It's free. You can read it as a web page from their website, or you can download it. You can also order a hard copy if you want to. They charge for that. They'll charge because they have to pay for the collating and the printing costs and all that. So they charge a little fee for that, but you're free to use it. So if you want to read it, just read it as a web page, you can from the website. I did pop that link in the chat room, and I actually volunteer with them. I have over the years, and have attended support groups with them. And I've also facilitated support groups with them. And I've got a group going now too. So I don't think they'll mind us using this information as long as I don't monetize my channel. So I don't make money off of this. And also I don't change the wording and say that I wrote it. Sort of thing. Right? That's what they don't want. So, as long as you give credit where credit's due, I don't think they mind people using this at all. And we're just going through it, looking at it for people who may have never heard of it. Survivor to Thriver workbook. What is it? What it's all about. For adult survivors of child abuse. ASCA, Adult Survivors of Child Abuse of More Center program, is a peer-to-peer support group. So, and there's lots of them. There are a lot of them are online. Some are actually in different cities all over the world, actually in physical locations where you would go to one of those meetings. But they do have online meetings for adult survivors as well. And so you can check the meeting list out and see if you were interested, you can see if there's a meeting in your area or just online that you'd be interested in attending. And I'm just going through the workbook here so people will have an idea what it's all about. And they give self-help section and also professional help section. And so I've just been reading through it and just talking about my own sort of stuff that I've been dealing with, which is basically kind of what I do, just to be a support for survivors of abuse. So, if you're sensitive to the topics of abuse, I always say this on all my shows, that you need to, sort of make the best decision for yourself, whether you should be listening, especially 9 o'clock in the morning. Abuse is not a fun topic. I do this at 9 in the morning, so I'm guaranteed that I'll actually do the show. I'm locked in, for now to do this at this time. And but the topics of abuse are very disturbing. And so you have to be, know what's good for you to listen to. If you think this might bother you or trigger you, you have to make the decision whether you should really be watching or not. And we're not going into anything too graphic, so it's not that. It's just that, you don't want to have a miserable day. And especially if you're a survivor of abuse, if you're just starting on your healing journey, you want to do a safety check. So I always do a safety check in the beginning of all my stuff. And that is just to say, I can ask myself as a survivor of abuse, am I going to be triggered by this? Hearing this information, am I feeling strong enough to listen today? Or should I go watch something else and come back and listen another day if I want to see what she's talking about, sort of thing? Or you can just look at the manual another time when you're feeling stronger, sort of thing, from the website. And, you wouldn't be hurting my feelings at all by turning the channel. You have to, if you're a survivor of abuse, make sure you're safe enough so that you're not going to hurt yourself, or you're not going to hurt somebody else, or be triggered and have a miserable day, not able to get a hold of your counselor or therapist if you're seeing one, and just sitting there in your own misery. You don't want that. You don't want to go backward in your healing journey. So do a safety check. See how you're feeling. And, if you don't feel strong enough today, or you think this information is just going to be too much for you to hear today, you can always come back another time when you're feeling stronger, right? Or you can get the information that I've got there on the web, on the chat. So just make that good decision for yourself, right? We won't be getting graphic here. It's just that it is talking about the repercussions of child abuse, especially dealing with adult survivor issues, right? So let's get into it. We left off on page, yesterday you can go back, we actually started step 7, and that's page 82. And step 7 was, I can sense my inner child whose efforts to survive now can be appreciated. So we went through that whole thing and the self-help part of it. Now we're looking at the professional help. And that's, reading through that really quickly, it's kind of like, what? I can sense my inner child whose efforts to survive now can be appreciated. So that's my inner child, who's I can actually appreciate that inner child who I was and who I used to be, who managed to survive what I managed to survive. And anybody, we can all give ourselves a pat on the back if you're a survivor of abuse. That's basically what they were talking about. And just, honoring that part of us that actually did survive and made it through, because it's hard. And as growing up abused, especially, it's very difficult. But any type of abuse, if you're an abuse survivor and you survived, you can honor who you were to have been put through that and actually make it through. And I actually do this quite often. Because it's like, yeah, I mean, so many people have been through so many very, very traumatic things, and we're still here, and we can give ourselves a pat on the back for surviving that, right? So the professional help section of this would be for if a member of the ASCA, or if you're just reading this and you don't belong to the groups, doesn't matter. If you're seeing a therapist, this is the information that would be helpful that you could discuss with your therapist if you were, going to go and have a meeting, and it was one of your meetings that you were going to, you could sort of explore this stuff with them. So they said, many survivors describe a particular feeling or sensation in their bodies that over time comes to represent their wounded inner child. So explore that feeling with your therapist and see if you can't bring this part of you into sharper focus. What does this wounded child feel like to you? And what does he or she want or need from you today? Are there any metaphors, images that capture the bodily sensations? That could explain what this child is experiencing. Many survivors report feeling empty inside or cut off, or a hole in the stomach. Exploring the inner child through your own personal metaphor may help you and your therapist figure out how to heal the wounds. And is that all they had to say on that? Yeah, that's the only part for the professional help. Usually they have a couple things, but on that one, that's the only one that's there. The inner child work, I did a lot of, like I talked about that on yesterday's show, and many people may not even realize that does happen to people. It's if you do the research on it, they call it subpersonalities, and these would be the points of the wounding. So that's the trauma. It's all stored in the limbic system in the brain, and the limbic system, the trauma, even war vets go through that. That's why PTSD. People who have survived explosions or plane crashes, or war vets, things like veterans in the military, things like that. People who end up with PTSD from really traumatic events, doesn't have to be abuse. It's sort of the same thing. It's that trauma gets stored in the limbic system, and the limbic system in the brain doesn't use words; it uses pictures, and that's why we keep reliving that trauma in pictures, right? And so that. I was talking yesterday, if you want to go back and watch that, the My Envision Mind is a program that helps get in touch with that limbic system, all the trauma that's stored in there, and actually helps to heal that part of the brain. It's really amazing, and that's the work that I've been doing with My Envision Mind out of Australia. Beverly Searle put that out, and that's what we were talking a little bit about yesterday. So that's all they had to say on that. So I didn't realize it was such a short section. We could have finished that yesterday. So the next step up is chapter 5. This is page 85 of the workbook. It's called Stage 2 Mourning. And the first part was, actually acknowledging, like looking at the abuse. The second part is called mourning. So mourning, that's like grieving. Mourning, the loss, right? The loss of our childhood, or the loss of whatever we're mourning. So that's the next part of this. And I just want to see what that first section says. Just give me one sec here. Sorry, I'll scroll through here. It's just taking me a second to find it. it's the first part was chapters 1 through 4 were remembering. That's what we just finished. And so now we are looking at mourning. So I've done all this work. Like I said, I did this manual years and years ago, and um, it was great. It was really great. Like this was just one of the first things I used in my healing journey, and I went through it like step by step, and we did the questions, did the work, and it was very helpful. And I still use it. Like in the meetings we use it, and I also use it in my own personal part of my thing that I'm working with my healing journey. I'm always kind of referring back to this manual. So chapter 5, stage 2 mourning is on page 85. He said in stage 2 recovery, the focus shifts from the details of your past abuse to the impact of the abuse on your adult life. And this stage represents the intermediate point in your recovery. So in which healing and change occur in tandem, each reinforcing and complementing the other. As in the 4th step of Alcoholics Anonymous, the cornerstone of stage 2 is taking an honest inventory of your current life problems and then dedicating yourself to changing the behaviors that are making your life unsatisfactory. For adult survivors, this means going beyond awareness of your self-sabotage and taking direct action to deal with it. Stage 2 also requires you to delve deeper into your psyche to face your shame, a core feeling experienced by many adults from dysfunctional families. Ultimately, you must challenge the shame and turn it around into self-acceptance, which will then become the source that nourishes your new self. And this will enable you to accept and express your grief over the disappointments in your childhood and mourn the loss of your dream of an ideal family. By letting go of childhood hopes for the parents who failed you and feeding your budding self-acceptance, you give birth to a new sense of entitlement. You will be free to be your own person and to choose how to live your new life. By altering distorted perceptions and beliefs and learning how to control your aggressive behavior, you will foster changes in your personality that will end forever, the possibility of your continuing the cycle of abuse with the next generation. And they say rarely does recovery proceed in a neat step-like progression, especially during this middle stage. There will be times when you stray from the focus on your abuse and head off in a new direction that seems too pressing to ignore or likely to yield valuable insights. So as you develop confidence in your ability to assert your opinions and even disagree with your therapist, family, and friends, you may find yourself examining your relationship with them. And this is a desirable and healthy development because it indicates that you are learning to express your newfound sense of autonomy. And this, they kind of mention a lot about, familial abuse, like if you were abused by a family member, that sort of thing. And not all abuse happens in the family. So, this doesn't just apply to people who maybe were abused by a parent or a caregiver. I mean, abuse of any type can cause the survivor of that abuse to have some shame and that they need to deal with and have life problems, that they're going through because of the abuse. They just sort of mentioned this whole thing about it being parents, parents who failed you and stuff like that. But you may have had good parents, but somebody else may have abused you. So this is the issue. They're not really just including sort of the whole thing. That it's not always a family member or somebody in the family that will abuse a child. So in my case, that's the case, but that's not with every case, right? But this information is still good for anybody who's survived child abuse because, we can, even if that family part doesn't have anything to do with your situation, it's the fact that we can mourn the loss of that innocence, like children. When children shouldn't be abused. We already know this. But the issue is children just want love and care and protection, and they want to be accepted in the family. If it's a family situation and it's abuse, it's very difficult. Even sometimes children are abused by an outsider, and then later will let the family know, and then there's no family support. I actually have met many survivors in that situation who were abused by somebody outside the family. And then they've tried to reconcile and get help within their family, who the abuse didn't happen in the family, it happened outside. And the family still doesn't, step up to the plate to acknowledge the abuse or to get them any help or to try to be a support. This can happen. And that's just so sad, right? Because children, you know, we as children most likely just wanted to live a normal life, you know what I mean? Abuse-free life. Um, it's, we, like, the shame that we might have taken on from whatever the abuse was, it wasn't our fault. So we don't have to take on that shame, right? Or the blame. And as far as, these feelings of that we wanted to, have a normal childhood. So even if the abuse didn't happen in your own family, like they were talking, the children just want to have a normal childhood. So a wounded child, no matter who did the wounding, it's gonna cause problems. It's gonna be an issue. So even if it wasn't a family member and it was just somebody who, like there's just it could be anybody who had access to the child, right? And so these things are very, very difficult. They really are. And mourning that stuff is very hard. I've done a lot of mourning and grieving work over the loss of my childhood and what it caused me as a young person, as a young adult. Very, very difficult, this stuff, because this is where the real work kind of starts taking place. Like they said, to change these behaviors that we're doing, and start to look at some of the stuff that we're actually doing that's self-sabotaging. It's very, very hard. Some of the stuff I didn't recognize that I was even doing. And so it's hard. Step 8. I have made an inventory of the problem areas in my adult life. So this is page 86. The initial step of stage 2 recovery involves taking a full and honest inventory of the problem areas in your life, because you first have to identify what you want to change before you can begin to change it. By now, you should be fairly clear as to how the abuse has affected your adult life. If you are still unclear about this, review the checklists and exercises in Chapter 2. You may also have identified additional problems that you did not recognize earlier, and if so, add them to your inventory. This inventory is more than just an accounting of your problems. It will serve as the blueprint for the changes that you need to make to create the new you. So that's just it. I didn't even recognize some of the self-sabotaging stuff that I was doing because it was just so part of my life, ingrained in me, that I didn't realize that it was even self-sabotage. I had to have it pointed out to me by a life coach, telling me, you can keep running if you want to. Because I told her I had been abused and I was having difficulties at work. And she was like, well, you can keep running if you want to, but you don't have to. You have rights. You can stand up for yourself, And she's like, as surviving abuse, and you can pat yourself on the back, and you have rights as an adult. You can stand up for yourself. So you don't have to run anymore. Right? And I was just shocked because I only talked to her for about 10 minutes, and I just happened to mention that I was abused as a child. And that's why I was freaking out over a situation that happened at work. And it was amazing that she picked that out. I didn't tell her that I ran from everything. She actually picked that out. She was very, very intuitive and figured out what I was doing. So I didn't realize that, I didn't think about it. But then after she said that, I'm like, oh, that's exactly what I've been doing my whole entire life, running all the time. And it's like, that's what the abuse caused me, because I didn't want to, push back and be an abusive type person. So I just leave the situation, leave the job, leave the country, whatever. Whatever I got to do, I'm going, And she's like, you don't have to do that anymore. So that was a big wake-up call for me wow, I need to start working on this stuff. So many things I didn't recognize that I was even doing to myself to self-sabotage as an adult survivor of child abuse. And so, these things are tricky. Once we actually start making a list of what we want to work on, what we need to do so that we can have a healthy life, it's a life that we create and we choose, and that's healthy, and that we're in control of, and we're as much as we can be, and that we are getting our needs met. Not just the basics of, it's like getting past the basics of, okay, I've got shelter, I've got a roof over my head, to actually start enjoying life, right? And find that stuff that we want to do. to actually enjoy this life. I mean, if you were abused as a child, that was unfair. I'll tell you that because I say that myself because I'm a survivor. That was really not fair. And, to have a ruined adult life, completely ruined adult life, to me is just the most unfair thing a person could do to not get help with their problems. And I've seen so many people do it. I watched my parents do it, my mom especially. And, my mom was a survivor of child abuse and then married my dad, became a victim of domestic violence. And she never got help. And on her deathbed, she never ever knew anything but abuse. She really, I mean, it just, I didn't want to do that. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, I'm going to reach out and get help, instead of just allowing myself to live the rest of my days out in this situation where, you know, it was all a real letdown. And in order to do that, I had to face some really hard stuff, because the abuse is hard to look at. Like, it's not easy to deal with. If you can't do it on your own, you have to get help, right? Get a counselor, get a therapist. There's no shame in that. And, so many times, like, we can't afford to do these things, but then the government will step in at some point and you have to help you, right? We really do deserve to have our needs met, whatever they are. And, as children, we didn't get our needs met. Obviously, as if you were abused as a child, your needs were not met in some way, somehow, right? And so as an adult, we really do have the right to stand up for our own needs. And we do have the right to get those needs met. No matter, however the case, we really do. So that's why this stuff is so important. And this step is really important. Like I said, the self-help section for this one is number one. This is page 86. Go back and review the journal entries that you have made to date and make a list of the concerns and problems you have identified. Which of these problem areas are the most disruptive to your life? Which need to be resolved or eased before you will be able to resolve the other ones? Are there any that need to be dealt with so you will not lose something important, such as a personal relationship, a job, or even your life? For example, if you can't afford the cost of therapy and have lost your health insurance benefits because of unemployment or underemployment, the lack of a job may be the biggest barrier to your moving forward in recovery. If you're depressed and immobilized in your life and are contemplating suicide, then getting help to manage your feelings is a high priority for you. If you feel that you might strike out at your child, thereby risking legal charges of abuse as well as renewed feelings of self-hatred, then you should focus on parenting issues. If you did not already do so in Chapter 2, rank each of these problem areas in descending order of priority and use this ranking to help you select those areas in which you need to focus the energies. So this is, really important. This stuff here is where the rubber meets the road. It's kind of like, the other stuff was kind of looking at abuse and what happened. This is kind of like, okay, now I've got to get it in gear and I got to start making changes so I can have a healthy life, so that I can have a good life. And everybody around me then, is in on that, right? And that's just making sure that we're not being abused. If you're in an abusive relationship, you want to get help. If you're contemplating suicide, you want to get help. If we're using drugs or alcohol or hurting ourselves in some way like that, we need to get help. We got to start working on this stuff too, right? Because otherwise, our healing journey it's just not going to really make that much of a difference. You can't really make much progress unless we actually start to work on this stuff. And that's what I started doing back in like when I hit 44. So it's been quite a few years now. So back in 2009, I really started to look at what I needed to do for myself, to stop the suicidal ideation, to get a grip on my life and actually start to control the destiny of my life, as much as possible. Like I said, we can't control everything. Right now we got COVID-19. It's just that was a big wake-up call. And it's like, whoa, we don't have much control over a lot, let me tell you. But we can control what kind of day we're going to have. And this is where I'm at. I can control that. And so, I can control whether I'm going to enjoy this life or whether I'm not, And I started to really look at what I needed, what was the most important things to me. which didn't have anything to do with money or, physical goods, stuff like that. I've just never been interested in that. I wanted peace in my life. I wanted peace in my heart. And I wanted to stop sort of self-sabotaging, self-injuring type thing. And I want to work on addiction stuff. I was addicted to drugs as a young person. I got off the drugs, but I never got off of the nicotine. And that's my big issue now. And I'm still working, I'm fighting against that all the time. And I know I'm going to actually start doing some work in that. So, that's the last vice I've kind of hung on to. So I want to get rid of it because I want to be completely victorious over this whole thing. You know what I'm saying? So I want to lose that addiction because I know the reason I'm doing it was because I was abused as a child. I have a feeling it's tied to the CSA child sexual abuse. So this is why I'm doing I'm going to get to the root of that. So I've got a lot of work to do. I still have a lot of work to do. And obviously, I'm using that nicotine to mask the feelings, and I'm quite sure it's the CSA child sexual abuse. I'm positive, actually, because I don't want to go back and feel those feelings and all of that work that I'm going to have to do. Even though I wrote a book about it and I've talked about it, I haven't let myself actually go back and feel those feelings and get in touch with that inner wounded part of myself that is still there, still needs to work through that stuff. Because until I do that, it's not going to change. So it's tough. These things are very, very hard, right? And they don't happen overnight. And like this workbook here, I mean, like they said, this section just takes as long as it takes. Because we're progressing through our healing journey, maybe working on several different things at a time. But we sort of always do tend to kind of go to another step to still keep working on that, right? Because this stuff takes time to get to even figure out what that list is in your life of what you want to change, what needs to change so that you can have a healthier, life that you have control over, that you decide what kind of life you want to have. As children, we were put through the ringer. If you were abused in any way, that's horrific. And it never should have happened, but obviously we're dealing with it now. And so, I didn't have the right to make choices as a child. I couldn't really make a choice of anything. And, I couldn't, otherwise I would have chosen not to be abused, definitely. And I would have chosen that my parents would have loved me. For sure, absolutely. That's what I would have chose. So obviously I didn't get to make choices that I wanted because my choices were squashed, children don't have that opportunity, right? So as an adult, we do. That's where it comes into. We have to start making better choices for ourselves. That's what I realized. I'm like, yeah, I got to start making better choices for myself. I'm in a safe situation now. I'm not out using drugs and putting myself in harm's way anymore. But the thing is I want better relationships with people. I need to change the way I handle relationships because I always end up ruining a relationship because of my fear of rejection and my fear of being wounded again and fear of pain and hurt, right? So I'm learning how to stand up for myself. That's one of my things that I work on. And it's not easy, but I'm continually working on it. Whenever I see an opportunity, I'm like, here's my opportunity. Let's see if I can do it. And it's hard, but I'm doing it. And it's a learning curve for me, for sure, to learn how to stand up for myself, that I do have rights, and that in any relationship, it's a two-way street. I want people to treat me good. On my friends, you know what I mean? I want my friends to treat me right. So I need to do the same for them. They're going to tell me if I've crossed their boundary. I need to do the same and tell them if they've crossed my boundary. And it should all be done in a way that we can maintain this friendship and so that we don't lose good friends, because I tend to push people out of my life. As soon as they get too close, I'm like, oh, well, they're too close. They got to go, and because obviously they're going to hurt me. that's just my inner wounded self, still running the show at the age of 55. So I had to make some real decisions on, what I needed for my life to be able to wake up every day and say, this is good. I'm making progress, little by little. It doesn't happen very fast for me, but it doesn't matter, because as long as it's going in the right direction, that's good. And we do have to sit down and actually think about these things, and they are difficult. It's kind of like, what do I need? You know, what is in my life that's causing me to have such a horrible adult life after coming from child abuse? Because we can all sit around and say, well, just being abused as a child, I mean, that's the issue, you know. And it would always take me to such a huge uh, pit of depression and despair because I was abused as a child. But I realized that until I dealt with that stuff, that's where I was always going to end up. And that's why at the age of 44, basically, I was like, I seriously have to start working on this stuff. And it's been a lot of work, let me tell you. But I'm like I said yesterday, I have never been in a better place than I am right now. This is the even after losing my husband 2.5 years ago because he passed away. Even after that, I'm still in a better place, which tells me that the work that I've done is holding. So I don't tend to regress. And I think that's because I slowly go through this stuff and really think it out and a journal about it or write about it or whatever, sort of make a mental note on many things of what I need to do to make sure that I'm still on my journey, still making progress. That's why I'm working on the CSA child sexual abuse stuff now because I'm feeling strong enough to get back into it. When my husband passed away, I had to put all that off, and I needed to be able to grieve and do all that stuff. So now I'm back on it, and I'm going to make progress. It'll be slow, but I'll get there. And it's just these things we can do for ourselves, whatever your situation is. We have to sit down, like they're saying, and make an inventory of what these things are in our life that are causing us so many problems. You know, is it interpersonal stuff with people? Is it a physical habit that we're doing? Is it depression? Do we need help? Do we need a therapist? Do we need some sort of counseling? Like whatever it is, right? We deserve to get help. We really do. And as children, like I said, for me, there was no help. And so as an adult, until I started on my healing journey, I just thought there was no help for me. Then I realized that there is help and I can reach out and I can get help. And I'm so glad that I did. That's why I'm saying I always tell people because I'm so thankful to be here. And, I mean, like I said, I have days where I'm not so happy to be here because some days really suck. That's all there is to it. We may as well be honest. It's not always this bed of roses, it's rarely a bed of roses. And it's not always even great, it's not even good sometimes. I'm really an honest person and life can really suck. And sometimes it just sucks for a long time. It doesn't get better. And I've started to recognize that, certain things, it just, you just know it's not going to be better for a while, right? Because it's just not. And so then how do we get through those moments, right? How do we get through those months or maybe possibly 6 months or a year of a period of time in our life that isn't looking like it's getting much better? You know what I mean? And that's where I'm kind of like to do these shows because I'm just a regular person who struggles with a lot of things and things will come up and throw me for a loop, and I'm like, well, my whole thing is just to dig in and say, well, I'm accepting that it's not going to be good for a while. And, that's just all there is to it. So what can I do to help myself in the meantime, right? And that's what I do. I focus on what I can do instead of looking at what I can't do. And say, well, I can do this. I can't fix the situation. It's too big. It's too, it's these little tiny things that help me get through the day. It doesn't mean the next day I'm waking up and everything's great and it's all roses. It just doesn't, life is kind of like not really like that for most people. I don't think. It's just finding through the day, finding peace with yourself, you know, and learning to take care of yourself. That's a big thing for me. Learning how to take care of myself. I work at it all the time because I was trying to kill myself, not take care of myself. You know what I'm saying? So now I'm like, okay, I can take care of myself. I really can because I've learned how to love myself. I'm like, yes, I love myself. I love the wounded part of myself. I love the ugly part of myself. I really do because, a lot of that wasn't my fault. It was just I took on a lot of, sort of, I don't know, aggressive behaviors because of being abused. And I'm like, okay, I love myself. I really do. And I'm learning how to take care of myself. And like I said, it's not easy. And some days I just don't want to do it. And I'm just like, whatever. But I'm like, no, no, we got to keep doing this. We got to keep trying to take care of ourselves and take care of my life and what's in it, everything that's in it. And it's not easy. Like I said, some days are just really difficult. That's why I'm just really good to myself. I really am. Like if I have a bad day and I'm not coping well, I don't put a lot of stress on myself. I really don't. And I just, I'm just like, you know what? That's just going to have to wait because right now I need me time and I'm going to sit and I'm just going to relax and I'm going to watch one of for me, stuff like watching one of my favorite movies is good when I'm having a day like that. A movie that just makes me kind of happy. Or if it's sad and you like it because it's sad, that's okay too. Sometimes we need to cry. Crying, there's no shame in crying. And abuse survivors, many times, I know when I was growing up, I wasn't allowed to cry. And because my mom was the only one that was allowed to cry. Seriously, I talk about it because it's absolutely true. Nobody else in the family was allowed to cry, but she was allowed to cry. And, we couldn't cry. So that was kind of harsh on a little girl who was being beaten and abused and sexually abused and everything else. So I stuffed all that and it became rage. And so now as an adult, if I have a day where I'm like, you know what, I need a good cry, I'll watch a sad movie and I'll just allow myself to just bawl my face off and let that out. You know what I mean? So I'm learning how to take care of myself in all ways, not just physically. I'm learning how to take care of myself spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, on every level. It's not just a physical thing. I'm still learning how to try to take care of myself physically too, so that I can still be here in this body on this earth. It's important. And I'm like, okay, I'm doing good. I'm doing good. But I'm not. Nothing's perfect. Nothing's perfect, and none. I don't think it's ever going to be perfect. But it's going to be to the point where I think it's perfect. That's that. That's that ability to say, I'm doing the best job that I can. And you know what I mean? It's nice to be on this end of it, let me tell you, because I used to be on the other side of it, like I said, so many years ago, where, it wasn't, it didn't ever seem to, I never thought I would get to be this at this point. You know what I mean? It just didn't seem doable. But now I'm like, okay, this is so much better. But it has taken a lot of work, like I said. And so whatever we need to work through, even if it's not so much physical stuff, but it's just more emotional, anxiety or PTSD type stuff, So many times people have this stuff going on in their life and are so afraid to reach out for help, you know. And I thought to myself, I didn't trust a one-on-one counseling therapy type situation, especially years ago, because I really didn't trust one-on-one with anybody. And that's probably because both of my parents were my abusers. See, so I don't trust one-on-one. Period. But now that I'm older, and I realize that not everyone is out there to hurt everybody, you got to still watch yourself. I talked about that yesterday. You can't trust everybody. You really can't. You need to have boundaries set, and you need to know what you're going to accept and what you're not. But I know there's good people out there. And so now, would I reach out to a therapist or counselor now? The answer is yes, because I've come a long way, like I said, with my trust stuff. I trust my decision-making processes much better than I used to. And I also know what I will allow and what I won't allow. And so if I went to a therapist and I just, you know, did the whole pre-screening thing where, is this a therapist that actually understands child abuse, understands adult survivor issues? Are they going to be able to help me? And then find out that they do. And then for some reason find that they're not helping me and they're just making me feel worse, then I would, of course, change therapists. Absolutely. Because we have the right to protect ourselves. We really do. So we just need to find out what these things are in our life that are causing the issue or the set of issues in our life that are, as adult survivors of child abuse, that are causing us to, that we feel need to be changed, because not everybody's got so many problems and some people have a lot of problems. I've had a difficult situation, even though like I said, I got off the drugs and stuff at a young age. I've still had many difficulties with relationship stuff, which causes me a lot of problems with jobs, because then if I'm not happy, I won't even try to stick up for my needs. I just quit. So I've quit really good jobs, and left really good situations because of that. Right? I've lost many friends over that. Some of them have taken me back, thankfully, because they love me, but and they understand that I'm wounded, and they're like, it's okay, we get it, and they're really good, people, right? So, I had so many problems with this stuff. I left my husband the first year that we were together, and I left him for a whole year. But that's just me running, running, running. So I had so many issues with this stuff. I had to get it under control. It's like, okay, it's me. I need to do some work on myself, and it's not my fault. I was abused as a child. I'm not too harsh on myself, sit around thinking, oh, I'm just a loser. I keep doing all this stuff. It's like, no, it's not my fault that I'm doing this stuff, but I need to change it so that I can have a good life, right? And so this is what I'm working on, right? Little by little by little, like I said, it doesn't happen very fast for me, unfortunately. And I do tend to repeat my mistakes many times until I finally see the pattern and I'm like, oh, I see what I'm doing. I get it. And that always comes back to rejection for me. And feeling like I might be rejected. I could be rejected. I may not have even been rejected yet, but I've already in my mind been rejected. So I'm like, they're just going to reject me. They're not going to want me. And that's just from growing up abused, right? With two parents who didn't want me, made it very clear that they didn't want me, and solidified it with physical abuse. Right? So, that whole rejection thing for me is harsh, right? And that's that little wounded girl. I mean, I remember being so young and just wanting love, just wanting acceptance from my parents. And none of my siblings were accepted, so it's not like I was the only one, which is kind of a relief for me because at least it wasn't the only one. But none of my siblings were wanted, so I mean, we're all in the same boat. But I still, even, apart from that, apart from them, my siblings, I remember myself being very young and just needing love, just wanting to be loved. And that's me as an adult now with these issues. They're not going to love me. They're not going to accept me. They're going to reject me. They're going to hurt me. So this is where I've had to go and do a lot of work to realize that my past is the past. Not everyone today is out to hurt me. And that's my inner wounded child, 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old, 12-year-old running the show, driving the bus. I can't let my 8-year-old drive the bus. Like, this is what she's been doing. I've been allowing my inner wounded self from so long ago, who's only like 8, 9 years old, to make these decisions for myself. And it's like, okay, that's where I realized I'm like, okay, I seriously have to, make some changes on how I'm going to deal with this stuff. I'm in control. I'm the adult, and I set boundaries up. I'm not being abused anymore. I need to start making better decisions for myself and start asserting my rights, like, and not being abusive, but just saying I do have rights and I can stand up for them. Absolutely. So it's doable, but it does take some time to see these patterns of what we're doing in our life, that might keep coming around. It's like, oh, I keep doing this. Why do I keep, what happens in a situation like that is I'll ask myself at some point why I'm doing it. And I'll be like, I keep ending up here. Why? And then, I mean, it's not because I was abused as a child. There's something else. There's another issue that's the root, and I'll be like, oh, I see why. Okay. And it almost always comes back to rejection, almost always. And I need to do some more work on that, obviously, because it's a roadblock in my recovery, in my healing journey. Right? So these things, it's good to take an inventory of what you have going on in your life that you want to change so that you can have a better life, and a better, just a better way of handling things so that these things don't keep happening, whatever they are, you know what I mean? Because we're all different, right? We're all different. We're all doing different things. We all have come through different things, and we all need different things. That's the issue. We may share the commonality of being abused as a child. So, we have that in common, but that's all we would have in common, really. I mean, apart from maybe a few other little things. Everybody's different, so whatever works for me may not work for you, but overall, whatever we have going on in our life as adult survivors, that we're doing that's causing, self-sabotage, feelings of, like they said here, feelings of self-hatred, whatever they are. We can work on this stuff and we can change it. And it does require some work, but it's worth it. It's worth it in the end. I had a lot of self-hatred going on for many years, and I worked on that and I changed it. And I learned to love myself. It's amazing, let me tell you. I had a lot of depression in my life, but now because I've been working on all this stuff, I don't have hardly any depression. And my husband just passed away 2.5 years ago, and he was my best friend. He was a good man. Like, he was my best supporter. And I'm doing good, right? And he was worried for me, because he knew I was suicidal for many years. He knew what I came from, and he was very supportive on my healing journey for everything that I was doing. And he was worried. He's like, I don't know what you're going to do when I go, because he was passing away. He was terminally ill. And I was like, well, I'm just going to have to keep going, I'm just going to have to keep going. And I mean, let me tell you, the first year was very difficult. There were mornings that I did not want to keep going. And there was mornings that I thought I couldn't keep going. And the whole year, I pretty well spent that whole first year just crying, and for part of the day. The other part of the day, I'd have to get up and go do something. But I was just like, this is the worst. It was a miserable situation, losing my best friend and my husband. But he was concerned because he's like, man, I don't know, because he knew how I was, And I was like, no, I'm going to keep going. And I'm going to make it. Absolutely. And he's like, well, I'll be waiting for you. He's such a sweetheart. He really was. I really was so, some people say lucky, whatever you want to say. So thankful to have that in my life, a good man, a good partner, right? And so I told him, he'd say, well, I'll wait for you. And I was like, well, I'll be waiting for you too. So, we had so much fun together. Those memories are wonderful. That's what gets me through, right? But he was concerned, and I told him, I said, I'm just going to keep going, and I'm going to keep working on this stuff, and I'm going to keep, going until I just don't go anymore. That's all, because he knew how hard it was for me, because he knew me before I started my healing journey. He knew I was suicidal. He knew I was having all sorts of problems, and so, he always felt bad for me. He wasn't abused as a child, so he really couldn't help me in that department. But he was just such a good, comforting supporter. Anything I needed, space, time, whatever, and anything that he could do to help me, he was willing to try to do what he could to help me. And what a good friend, you know what I mean? So I owe it to myself. People say, well, I owe it, I could say I owe it to him, but actually what it is I owe it to myself to have a good life. I really do. Because I can't go back and change the past. I can't. There's nothing I can do to go back and change the past. It's just the past is the past. It's done. Right? So then I had to start thinking differently. It's like, okay, well then I can't go back and change the past. So what am I going to have to do, to have a good life, right? With the rest of my days, however many there are. And I thought, well, I got work to do, right? Which means some painful stuff, because I'm going to have to go through this stuff and deal with it, And it's been difficult, absolutely, So that's what I'm saying. It's not like a bed of roses all the time, oh, life's great and it's just so wonderful. It's like, no, that's why I'm really thankful I've got a support network around me. That's why I keep talking about it, because it's so important. Like, just to be suffering on your own, that's where I used to be. And I used to fall into a pit of despair because I was suffering on my own. And it was very difficult to want to keep going, But all of a sudden, I've got all these hands. As soon as I started reaching out, I was like, hello, I need help. All these hands started coming towards me, and they were like, we'll help you. I mean, so many people just, immediately were there like, we'll help you, because they knew how hard it was, because they're survivors of abuse. And they get it, because they've been there, right? And so that's why I always tell people, you've got to, it's really, it was so helpful for me, to reach out, and get some help. Right? And you can do it anonymously too. You don't even have to tell people your name. That's, at first I used to be anonymous I used to sign up with anonymous names for anonymous group support. Because when I first started my healing journey, I just was really, let me tell you, it was hard, right? It's hard to make that decision, to make that first step. But once I took that first step and all these hands started coming out to reach out to me, I was like, this is awesome. I'd never, ever had as much support in my lifetime as when I started to reach out. Right? And, my husband was happy for me because he was like, wow, for the first time, like you're getting help with this and people that understand where you've been. He was all happy for me. And, when I wrote my books, he was there, he didn't, I let him read them when they were done. And he was just like, because he knew what I'd been through pretty much, but he was just like, I'm so happy for you. You're doing so good. And life started to change for me when I started to reach out, and that doesn't mean go in public with your stuff, but I'm just saying, for me, at first I was doing anonymous group support and it was awesome because all of a sudden I had people who were offering resources, telling me what really worked. And like for what, so for instance, the Survivor to Thriver workbook, you know what I mean? They just point out books that were helpful, this sort of thing, this sort of stuff. And all of a sudden I started realizing there's a whole network of people out here who are very, very helpful and empathetic because they can empathize because they've been there. They know how hard it is. It made a huge difference. Absolutely. So that's why I always tell people, if you don't want to do this alone, you don't have to. There's a lot of people out there who can help you, right? And some people are loners and they like to do, they don't want that, and that's okay, whatever. The issue is don't suffer on your own if you don't want to, right? Because there's plenty of good help out there. Right? So number 2, they said in ASCA meetings, this is still page 86, talk about this process of making an inventory. What feelings arose in the process? What are some of the difficulties, surprises, and successes in creating this inventory of your adult life? And then they've got professional help next. It's quite lengthy, actually. So I think we'll pick that one up tomorrow. And then we'll move on to step 9. But you can get this manual, like I said, from the ASCA, Adult Survivors of Child Abuse More Center program. It's free. And just, go through the parts that are sort of pertaining maybe to you if you want to take a look at it. Because not everything pertains to everybody. But I just thought it was helpful for sort of the first thing that I was looking at for adult survivor material. It's one of the first things that I was looking at and got a hold of that I thought was really helpful. And then John Bradshaw's books were really, really helpful as well. And I actually did the work in those too. Like they're like little workbooks within the book. He asks questions and you can sort of, journal or put whatever, answer the questions, whatever. It does help you to see, like, it helps you to categorize things. Makes it a little bit easier to deal with stuff instead of just being jumbled all over the place, It helped me out when I first started my healing journey. And so those were both, I know there's a lot of good material out there. Pete Walker has some good material. There's a whole bunch of people out there that's got great material. And Robert Burney, I liked his stuff because he's talking about codependency, which I had no idea really what it was. And I knew my parents were brought up on abuse charges. They were both charged with child abuse, and the courts didn't remove us from the home because they weren't worried about them killing us, but they were told to go to counseling. And they said the whole family needed counseling. They were diagnosed with all sorts of mental illness. And my mom was codependent for sure. So I grew up in that and I didn't have a clue what it was and, what I was doing. I had to look at that just to see what I was doing. I'm like, oh yeah, I see. Okay. That's codependency. It's a toxic codependency. There's a healthy codependency, but then there's this toxic stuff too, right? So until I saw that, I didn't realize. See, this is why that for me, reading and researching this stuff out really pointed out what I had been through and what I was doing because I had been through that, say, to protect myself or to get through it or whatever, you know what I mean? Or just to mask it, like, because we're always trying to get out of the pain, and that's a human nature, right? Obviously, nobody likes to be in pain, and so we'll do anything to get out of the pain, whether we, mask it by drug use or alcohol or any other addiction, putting a mask on it so we don't feel it. It's like, oh, I don't want to feel that. We avoid stuff. There's avoidance techniques, all sorts of things. And unless we see it, and we may not even realize we're doing it. Right? So that's why that stuff was really helpful for me, just to take a look and see, what are some of the common things that people go through. And I realized that I was doing a lot of it, not all of it, but quite a bit of it. And I'm like, wow, okay, I got to change that. I really do. If I want to live a healthy, happy life, I'm going to have to change this stuff. And my whole thing was I just didn't want to repeat what my parents had put us through. I didn't want to continue to live this horrible life as an adult, you know, making really poor choices for myself. I thought, I need help. I really do. And it wasn't my fault, like I said, and that's the issue. It's sad because, it's not my fault that I've had to, that all this stuff happened because I was abused as a child, right? But it is my responsibility as an adult to take control of my life and make the right, good choices for myself. That is my that is my responsibility. Nobody else can do it for me. That's why I realized. I mean, my brothers, they had killed themselves in their mid-30s, and they were drug addicts. I mean, heavy drug addicts for years, years and years, and they just couldn't do it. And I thought, how sad. You know what I mean? Like that just to let my abusers win. Our parents, you know what I mean? And I just thought, I don't want. I'm not doing that. You know, like I want to win this fight. That my parents started so many years ago. For me, it was family abuse. See, so my abusers were both my parents and one of my brothers. So I thought, no, I'm winning this fight, man. I'm doing it. I'm winning because I'm going to have a good life. And that's why, you know, I was just determined, like determined to get through this stuff. But it is difficult, like I said. And there's days where it's just really hard. And I mean, that's why I say it's good to have a support network because if you're having a hard day, if you have a good friend who really cares about you, for real, you can contact them and you can say, I'm really, really struggling today. I just really am. I just need someone to talk to, and, you know, just having that person in your life who cares. I mean, that's important. It really is. But so many survivors don't have a support network around them, right? And that's sad. That's where I was, just nobody who could understand really what I've been through. So when I started reaching out, that's what I'm saying. Things started to change, right? And all of a sudden I felt empowered to actually, get on this healing journey and really do something about this stuff, right? So it's been great. Like I said, I have never, like I said, been in this better. I've actually started to make really better decisions for myself. And I've had to reach out for help many times this last year with COVID-19. And because of the issues and job loss and everything else, and plus I had skin cancer and all kinds of problems. And I've had to get things done and actually stand up for myself. Say, okay, I can stand up for myself. I'm proving it. This last year was a big test for me to see if I'm actually making progress. And I mean, there was a few times that I actually had to push back a little bit and say, no, you're helping me. I need help. You're going to help me. I'm a person on the planet. I've got rights, just like that person over there who's sitting right there. They have rights too. They're getting their needs met. So you're going to help me get mine met, right? I'm starting to learn that I count and I matter just as much as that next person over there, right? And just because I was abused as a child and made to feel that I didn't count and I should have just died with the stillborn babies and, my mother should have just killed me when I was a baby. This is the kind of stuff I grew up hearing, and that I was just worthless and didn't count. I'm starting to get the upper hand on that now because, like, no, I do count and I'm not going to be abusive, but I'm going to get my needs met. And that means if I have to just keep knocking on that door or making those telephone calls now with COVID-19, because most of us aren't, most places are open, but it's still not quite open, right? Most of the world, we have a right to get help. We really do. Everybody else does, so why wouldn't we, right? So this is what I'm saying. I've made huge progress. Years ago, I wouldn't have made those calls. I wouldn't have even gone to those offices to get help. I would have just been like, oh, that's just my life, right? And it's like, no. Things have changed, man. I'm stepping up to the plate. I'm the adult in the situation. I can make these good decisions for myself, right? So, it's just important to be your own best advocate. Whatever your needs are, whatever you feel that you need to be your own best advocate and get yourself some help, right? If you're struggling. So I will end it here today, and I appreciate Wanda and Pasagio Olivelo and everybody else who's been here and dropped in. I thank you for spending this time with me. Very nice. I'm usually doing this by myself, like I said, so it's pretty lonely. So I do appreciate you being here. I hope you get something out of this, everybody. And I just hope that you'll stick it out and that you won't give up. That's my big main message, you know. And I say it on every show because I never know who's going to watch one show and never watch another one. So I say it on. I always say it at the end of all my shows, and that is, if you're struggling and you're having a hard time, and you seriously don't think you're going to make it, you need to call a crisis line. You really do, because that's people on the other end of that are people that care, because they're not getting paid that much to do that job, and it's not a fun job sitting on a crisis line. They're doing it because they care. They're there because they really do want you to call. And I know for myself, if I ever get down that low again, where I'm thinking, contemplating suicide, and I'm thinking, I can't do it. You know, you need to make that phone call. Pick up the phone and call somebody. Do not be destroyed by your past. Do not let those abusers win, whoever they were. Do not be destroyed by the abuse that you suffered. It's not okay. You need to win this fight. You need to stick it out with me. You really do. Not for me, for you, right? I'm winning this fight. I'm staying alive. And I don't care what it takes. I'm making a phone call. You know what I'm saying? So you stick it out and you wait for a better day. It may not come for a long time, like I've said on many videos. There may not be a good day for a long time. It just may be really crap. But let me tell you what, you have to keep looking for the better day. It could be a while, but you have to keep going, right? This is the issue. So it won't get better unless you keep going. So you have to keep going. So don't give up, my friends. Not ever. Not ever. Because like I always say, every day that I wake up is a slap in my abuser's face. Absolutely. I'm still here. I'm doing good. I'm enjoying life. I'm getting help. And, you know, it's just a slap in their face. Absolutely. Because they couldn't kill me and they couldn't get me to kill myself. So have a wonderful day, everybody. Thank you, Wanda. Have a wonderful day. I hope you have a good day. Have a good night, Passagio Alibello. Take care, everybody. Till tomorrow.